This is a keyboard, and that's a controller. Now try to imagine a device that combines both of these two things into one single being. And what do you get? That's right, if you guessed it, I'm talking about the Logitech NetPlay keyboard controller. This work of art takes the best parts of the beloved PS2 controller and combines it with the practicality of a standard keyboard. Truly innovation at its finest. And today, I'm going to be taking a stab at... Yeah, what's up? We don't have one. So what am I going to mod then? Well, I guess we're doing this one.
In the year 2000, Sega announced that it would, within the year, create a new world. In that virtual world, the internet. And draw the front line of network gaming for the whole world.
Phantasy Star Online, or PSO for short, was originally ported to the Nintendo GameCube back in 2002. It was around this time where a company by the name of ASCII Corporation began to develop a controller specifically designed to help players communicate in PSO. For the design itself, they basically took a regular GameCube controller, split it in half, and put a keyboard at the center, which may sound a little lazy in terms of design, but I think it works fine because they're essentially not really changing anything. They're just taking two already amazing products and putting it together, which is, you know, plain simple, straight to the point. That's all you really need. But I don't want to bore you guys with the facts, so let's just jump straight into it. First things first, you gotta inspect the quality. I did buy this off of eBay, so there's no like real guarantee that this will be perfect. But fortunately, everything seemed to be in like near mint condition. All the buttons feel smooth, triggers are loose. There is, however, like some small scratches on the back, but other than that, I'm pretty happy with the quality. But just because it looks good doesn't mean it works good. You always gotta check the internals. And what better way to test that than starting up a game of Smash? You know, like actually when it comes to testing new controllers, I always use Smash because the game's like super responsive to your controls, so it's really easy to tell when something's, you know, off or whatnot. For this controller in particular, I'm not even gonna lie, like this legit is better than my actual controller, which is kind of fucked up, but hey, it is what it is. Now to test the keyboard, which doesn't actually work. So apparently you need an adapter for it to actually work, and I don't really plan on getting that because I'm going to be gutting this thing out anyways, which I'll explain a little later in the video. Also, for all you PSO fans out there, I don't actually own the game. So, you know, sorry to disappoint. Also, what's up with these standoffs? Like, look at them. They're literally massive, and there's like a billion on there. Like, what were they thinking when they made this? I can already tell this is gonna be an issue later, so yeah. Also, I don't think I mentioned this earlier, but this is indeed a membrane keyboard. It's my first time working with one, so I gotta say it's pretty weird. I'm more used to like the typical fiberglass PCBs and the mechanical switches, so this plastic PCB and the silicone pads on the back like really threw me off. Some of you may have noticed, but these keycaps are really tiny. I guess in order for them to fit 81 keys, it would make sense for them to like compact everything by shrinking it down. Here's a TOFU 60% for comparison. As you can see, the GameCube layout's it's way smaller, like roughly the size of a 50% layout, which is conveniently the same size as a Preonic. So, you probably guessed it, I'm going to be using a Preonic for this build. I'm only going to be using the hot swap PCB, the aluminum top plate, and the screws that come with it. Now, this is where I hit my first roadblock of trying to figure out how to mount this top plate. One idea would be to screw it onto the bracket, but I didn't like how it would only be supported on one side. Another option would be to use hot glue to keep it in place, however, I'd prefer to be able to remove it whenever I want. So, you know, that's out. I could also just let it rest on the back of the shell and call it a day, but then I run into the issue of it, you know, sliding back and forth. So ultimately, after a bunch of trial and error, I came up with this idea. Essentially, it would be a big sandwich where the top and bottom shell screw together, while in between, the original aluminum plate at the bottom will screw into the top shell. The Preonic top plate, on top obviously, will screw down through the PCB and onto the original plate. Then, you know, I'll add a bunch of foam in between and a boom bam bop, that's the build. Hopefully that made sense. But for this to even work, I have to cut off this bracket. And honestly, it hurts to do this because, one, there's no going back, and two, I don't exactly have any spares lying around, so if I fuck up, I fuck up. Oh, yo, here's a pro tip. Periodically check to see if your ideas will work. Because, you know, not everything will go according to plan. But, you know, for me, that never happens because, you know, I'm kind of a big deal. So, you know, I never mess up. You know what I'm saying? All right, so I messed up. I over-tightened the screws underneath and it ended up damaging the other side. It's not the biggest deal since I'll be painting over it, but, you know, hopefully it won't be too hard to notice, so yeah. For switches, I'll be using the Gazoo U4T Boba switches. I've had these things lying around for like a year, so I think it's high time I use them. And you know what that means? I'm gonna be lubing every single one of these switches, yeah. Being the amazing content creator I am, I'll be showing you every single part of the process step by step from the beginning to the end so that you... Alright, now I'm gonna do some paint prep. You always gotta make sure the surface you're painting on is clean. So I typically use something like detergent, but you know, something like dish soap should be a good alternative. I also use the Scotch-Brite side of the sponge to, you know, really rough up the surface. Like nothing too crazy, but just to have some kind of texture for the paint to like stick on. That's right, you already know I'm going to be painting an Initial D themed controller. Why? Because why the fuck not? Anyways, I started off with a gray surface primer for both the top and bottom shell. Afterwards, I did various coats of white and black, and here I ran into an issue with the black paint I was using. I'm not sure why, but this paint in particular wasn't fully coating, so I don't know, maybe one of you guys can let me know in the comments what exactly was causing that. I ended up letting it dry overnight, and then I painted over it with a different black paint I had lying around, which this ended up fine, so I don't know. And now, for the most exciting part of this build, cutting out my own vinyl decal stencils. So in the past, I used to do it by hand, and you know, I don't have really the cleanest cuts, so things kind of like turned out a little scuffed. But now that I got myself my own vinyl cutter, I could do more complex designs and have them be perfectly cut. Again, I had an issue where the paint wasn't sticking on some spots. Honestly, I think it's probably due to the oils on my hands when I was moving it around and whatnot, but you know, whatever. In any case, I'm going to be doing some touch up anyways, because if you look closely here, some of the paint bled through the stenciling. I guess I didn't fully seal down the vinyl, so the paint was able to get in, but I'm not really upset because this is just clearly my inexperience showing. You know, in time I'll get better. You know, hopefully. And voila! Now time for the clear coat.
Alright, I'm about to spray some 2K. You see here? I'm making sure that I'm super covered up too. Gloves, fucking shoe covers. That was pretty good. I'm in a hazmat suit. Gotta look at this stuff. It's super toxic. Look at that. Extreme danger. You don't want this on your skin, your clothes, nothing. You want to breathe this in. It's horrible for you. But here's the best result, so it is what it is. I'm not going to film any of this because I don't want to get this in on my phone, so I'll show this after.
Okay, now I know it says reassembly, but before I do any of that, I have to fix this glaring issue with my build, the controller cable. As it is right now, the cable's plug here is blocking the area where the keyboard USB would go. To solve this, I would have to desolder the plug and put it on the other side, which sounds simple enough, but there's another issue I'll run into, which is a lack of contact between the pins and the PCB. So normally when soldering, all you have to do is push the pins through the PCB and solder it plain and simple. However, in my case, there aren't any solder pads on the other side of the board, so even if I stick the pins through, the solder will only make contact with the pins and not the PCB. In order to fix this issue, I ended up soldering the pins in between the plug and the board, and ultimately that was enough contact to make things work. For this build, I'll be using a Durock stabilizer, the Tempest tape mod, a layer of 1mm EVA foam for the backplate, 3mm MLV that I actually won't be using, which I'll explain a little later in the video, 2mm EVA top plate foam, and 1mm EVA PCB foam. By the way, I just want to point out that all the EVA foam here was cut out using my vinyl cutter, which, definitely is not its intended use, but, I've been making the most out of it, so, kudos to me. Okay, so here I want to add some silicone O-rings to the standoff screws to create some flex. Unfortunately, this is where I found an alignment issue with the USB port and the shell here. So to fix this, I ended up swapping the screws for longer ones, added a spacer, and ended up only using one O-ring instead. And that was enough clearance for the USB. I'm starting to wonder why I'm having so many issues with this one area. Like, what's going on here? But wait, there's more. Since I made the whole layout a bit deeper, there's now some interference with the giant standoffs at the bottom of the shell. Remember how I said that these standoffs would be an issue later? Well, here we are. Now I gotta trim every single one of these things down, so yeah. I also added a layer of polyfill to the back of the shell in order to fill some empty spaces, as well as a layer of shelf lining between the standoffs and the back plate. And with that being said, everything finally fits into one piece. Now for the keycaps. For this, I'm going to be using the MP Profile White Dysa PPT keycap set. And on the GameCube side of things, I'm going to be using sticks by Seltzer, buttons by Smashproof, and trigger and Z buttons by Lev Customs. I personally think that this color scheme matches perfectly with Takemi's 8.6, so yeah. And here, I decided to have a crack at lubing the GameCube triggers. To be honest, I wasn't exactly sure what I was doing, but I figured that I could just lube it the same way I did for switches and stabilizers, and honestly, I think it came out pretty well, so I don't know. Now to finally assemble everything. Or not. Yeah, so it looks like I forgot about the controller PCB because it's not sitting flush to where it needs to be. So I'm going to have to do some more trimming around the back plate in order to make room for the board. And, you know, definitely worried about some stability issues, but I think there's enough screws there to keep everything in place, so I think we should be good. Oh yeah, I also removed that layer of MLB I was talking about earlier, just so I can make some more room for the PCB here. And now that there are no more issues, it's time to actually finally reassemble everything. Anyway, here's the finished build. Yeah, so this was definitely my most challenging project to date. It literally took about a year to plan everything out, to get the parts, to build everything, and edit the video. It's literally been such a wild journey. Also, real quick, shout outs to Holy Chipmunk. He's the guy who inspired me to even start this crazy project. I knew when I first saw his GameCube key back like last year, I knew I just had to make this thing because this thing literally combines two of my favorite hobbies into one piece. It's like a no-brainer. I had to make this thing. So shout outs to the other folks like Can't Remember Old, Flirpy Flurples, RetroCat Gaming, Twerkmaster BTLC, FlashJom, and etc. I'll list all the folks who inspired me down below in the description. Anyways, enough of me talking. Let's just get into the sound test. All right, closing remarks. What do I say? Oh, yeah. So I just want to apologize for the lack of content recently. I've been dealing with a lot of like rough things in real life, so I've pretty much been like prioritizing all that stuff over the YouTube, which it is what it is. But don't worry, I still plan on making some videos. I got a lot of things planned for the future, but I'm just gonna say I don't really have like a consistent schedule right now, and I probably won't have one till like next year. So, just check in back in like a couple months, and I'll probably have something down. So, yeah, it is what it is. So whatever. Until then, yeah, I don't know. Don't fucking let me tell me what to do. See ya.